Have you ever maybe stared at your closet or, that pile of stuff in the corner and just felt overwhelmed,
Yep.
like too many possessions?
Oh, definitely. Or maybe you've tried to set a really clear rule, maybe for yourself or your family.
Yeah, and then real life just crashes into it.
Exactly. With all its, messiness and human behavior, and suddenly the rule is either way too strict or surprisingly, people find ways around it.
Right. Well, today we're actually taking a deep dive into exactly that kind of dynamic.
But we're going way back, like thousands of years back.
Yeah, we're heading into ancient Buddhist monastic law, the Vinaya.
And the topic, believe it or not, is robes. Simple monastic robes. But it turns into this incredibly complex legal and ethical thing.
Pretty fascinating. So the source materials, as you said, is the Vinaya. That's basically the rule book, right? The code for monks, the bhikkhus.
Pretty much, yeah. It covers everything, their daily conduct, how they resolve disputes, the works.
And what's really cool, or revealing, I guess, is seeing how these rules weren't just like handed down perfectly formed.
Not at all. They clearly evolved, often because of real-world problems, and sometimes, let's be honest, because monks got a bit creative with interpreting the rules.
Okay, so our mission today is to sort of unpack how this really basic rule about possessions, just robes, led to these unexpected problems.
Right, and how that forced the system to develop more clarity, some flexibility, and this really detailed legalistic thinking. It's trying to balance the ideal with, well, reality.
And you might actually find some surprising parallels to modern life, even in these ancient rules.
Absolutely. So let's set the scene. The initial situation, the allowance from the Buddha, was pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Monks were permitted to have 3 robes, a set called cīvara. That was it.
3 robes. Seems reasonable, simple, non-attached.
That was the idea. Promote simplicity, detachment, keep things basic.
But simple rules in human nature, right? They don't always mix perfectly.
Exactly. Which brings us to the Nissaggiya bhikkhus.
Ah, the group of 6 monks. I feel like we hear about them a lot in these texts.
We do. They often seem to be the ones testing the boundaries. Let's put it that way.
So what did they do with the 3-robe rule?
Well, they kind of saw it as a starting point, maybe. They started accumulating extra robes,
Excess robes.
and it wasn't just that they had them, they were using them very specifically.
How so?
Like one set for when they went into the villages, another set just for staying in the monastery, and get this, another set just for bathing.
Wow. Okay, that definitely seems to miss the point of simplicity.
Right. It looked like hoarding, like attachment. It went against the whole spirit of the rule.
And I imagine not everyone was thrilled about this.
Not at all. You had the monks of few desires, the apicca bhikkhus, who were understandably quite displeased.
They saw this as flaunting the rules.
Yeah, pretty much. So they complained to the Buddha. They felt it was a disregard for the monastic ideal.
So the complaint reaches the Buddha. What happens then?
Well, this was a key moment. The Buddha responded pretty directly. He reprimanded the Nissaggiya bhikkhus.
What was his main point?
He basically said, look, actions like this aren't going to inspire faith in lay people or other monks.
Yeah.
You're undermining the principles you're supposed to represent.
It wasn't just about the robes themselves, but the message it sent.
Exactly, the example they were setting. So this led to a change in the rule book.
Okay, a clarification was needed.
Yes. The Buddha laid down a specific rule, a sikappara, it stated. If a monk keeps an excess robe, it is a Nissaggiya pācittiya.
Nissaggiya pācittiya. That sounds serious. What does it mean, practically?
It is serious. It's not just a slap on the wrist. It means 2 things have to happen.
Okay.
1, the monk has to relinquish the item, give up the excess robe. And 2, they have to formally confess the offense to the community.
Wow. So giving it up isn't enough. There's a public acknowledgement, too.
Right. It reinforces that community accountability. It's a significant disciplinary step designed to stop the hoarding.
Okay, so new rule in place. Problem solved.
Well, as often happens, solving one problem can sometimes create unforeseen issues for people trying to follow the rules in good faith.
Ah, unintended consequences.
Exactly. And this leads us to Venerable Ananda. He's a major figure, one of the Buddha's chief disciples.
Right. What was his situation?
So Ananda comes into possession of an extra robe and a tirkativar.
Okay, so technically, under the new rule, that's a problem.
Potentially, yes. But his intention was completely pure. He wanted to give this robe to Venerable Sariputta, another very important monk.
Okay, a gift. That sounds fine. What's the catch?
The catch was logistics. Sariputta was far away, staying in a place called Nissaggiya.
Right.
And Ananda wasn't sure exactly when Sariputta would arrive. The text says maybe the 9th or 10th day away.
Ah, I see the dilemma. Ananda has this extra robe now. The rule says no excess robes. But he can't give it away now because Sariputta isn't there.
Exactly. He's caught. He wants to do a good thing, give the robe away, but the strictness of the new rule seems to prevent it, or at least make it very difficult.
It really highlights that tension, doesn't it? The letter of the law versus the spirit, or just practical reality.
Absolutely. So Ananda, being Ananda, goes to the Buddha with this problem.
He asks for clarification.
Yes. And when the Buddha hears the details, specifically that Sariputta is expected around the 9th or 10th day,
He sees the practical issue.
right, he recognizes that a rigid rule, while well-intentioned, needs some flexibility for situations like this. It wasn't about weakening the rule against hoarding, but making it work.
So he adjusts the rule.
He does. He allows a specific grace period. This leads to the amended rule.
The famous 10-day allowance.
That's the one. The revised rule basically says, after the robe-making period is finished and the kaṭhina ceremony is over.
Okay, let's pause there. What do those conditions mean? Robe-making period finished.
Generally, it means the time when monks would traditionally receive or make their robes for the year is over. Either the monk has their set, or they've lost it, it's ruined, or they've given up hope of getting one for that season.
And the kaṭhina ceremony.
That's a special event, usually at the end of the rainy season retreat. It often involves lay followers donating cloth or robes to the monks. So it marks a kind of endpoint for acquiring robes for that period.
Got it. So after all that is settled.
Then a monk may keep an extra robe and a tirukakava for a maximum of 10 days.
Ah, there's the grace period Ananda needed.
Exactly. But crucially, if you go beyond those 10 days,
Then it's in Nissaggiya pācittiya again, back to the offense.
right, the allowance is specific and limited. It's a window, not an open door.
And just to be clear, what counts as an excess robe in this 10-day context?
Good question. It specifically means a robe that hasn't been formally designated or determined as one of the monk's allowed set of 3. It's sort of in limbo.
Okay, so it's about formalizing what belongs to you within that time frame.
Precisely. You have 10 days to sort it out, designate it, give it away, whatever needs to happen.
So what happens if a monk doesn't sort it out in 10 days? On day 11?
On the dawn of the 11th day, that robe officially becomes Nissaggiya. It now requires relinquishment. The grace period is over.
And the process for relinquishing it, you said it was very specific.
Oh, incredibly specific. It's called Nissaggiya. It's not just, dropping the robe somewhere. It's a formal procedure.
Walk us through it. What does the monk have to do?
Okay, so let's say the monk needs to relinquish it to the whole sangha, the community.
Right.
They approach the assembled monks, adjust their upper robe respectfully, bow to the senior monks, then squat down, clasp their hands in respect.
Wow, very formal.
Very. And then they declare something like, "This robe of mine, venerables, has exceeded 10 days and is Nissaggiya. I relinquish it to the sangha."
A public declaration and handing over.
Yes. And after this declaration, the monk also needs to formally confess the pācittiya offense itself.
Okay, and then what happens to the robe? Does the community keep it?
This is a key part. No, they don't usually keep it permanently. A competent monk, designated by the sangha, receives the confession, acknowledges it, and then, with the sangha's agreement, formally returns the robe to the offending monk.
Returns it. So the monk gets it back.
Yes. The point isn't necessarily permanent confiscation. It's about the process. The acknowledgement of the error, the formal relinquishment, the confession, the community's involvement, and then restoration.
That's fascinating. It's about accountability and reintegration, not just punishment.
Exactly. It cleans the slate while ensuring the monk still has their necessary requisites. The same basic process applies if relinquishing to a smaller group or even just one other monk, just adjusting the address used.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, you mentioned offenses earlier. This seems like a good time to dive into the nitty-gritty. What exactly triggers the Nissaggiya pācittiya versus maybe a lesser offense?
Right. The Vinaya is very detailed here. It distinguishes between the main offense, Nissaggiya pācittiya, and a lesser one called dukkaṭa. And a lot hinges on the monk's state of mind, their knowledge, intention, perception.
So for the big one, the Nissaggiya pācittiya, how does that happen?
Well, the clearest case is if a monk knowingly keeps that undesignated robe past the 10-day limit, they know the rule, they know the time is up, and they still hold on to it.
Okay, straightforward violation.
Yes. But it also applies if the monk is in doubt whether the 10 days are up, but they probably are, and they keep it anyway. Or even if they mistakenly think the 10 days haven't passed, but they actually have.
Wow, so even an honest mistake about the date can still lead to the full offense.
If the robe has actually exceeded the time, yes, the objective fact matters. It also covers thinking an undesignated robe is designated, or an unrelinquished robe has been relinquished when it hasn't. The perception needs to match the reality according to the rules.
That's quite strict. What about the lesser offense, the dukkaṭa? When does that apply?
A dukkaṭa is incurred, for instance, if a monk uses a robe that has already become Nissaggiya, meaning it's overdue for relinquishment before they've gone through the formal relinquishing process.
Ah, so using something they shouldn't be holding on to in that state.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
an offense of improper procedure or use. Also, interestingly, it's a dukkaṭa if a monk mistakenly thinks the robe has exceeded 10 days when it hasn't, or if they're in doubt about it when it hasn't.
So thinking you've broken the rule when you haven't is a minor offense.
Yes, it shows a lack of clarity or mindfulness about the situation, even if the main offense wasn't actually committed. The Vinaya really tries to cover all angles of awareness and intention.
Okay, so when is there no offense, an anapati? When is a monk totally in the clear?
Well, obviously, if they deal with the robe correctly within the 10-day limit.
Right, designate it, give it away, etc.
Exactly. Or if the robe is genuinely lost, ruined, burnt, or stolen before the 11th dawn arrives. Circumstances beyond their control.
Makes sense.
And there are standard exceptions, too, for monks who are considered mad or not mentally responsible. And interestingly, for the very first offender, the one whose actions caused the rule to be made or clarified in the first place.
Ah, the one who set the precedence doesn't get penalized for it.
Kinda, yeah. And just when you think we're done with the Chabagyas.
Oh, no, they're back.
One last appearance in this story. Remember how relinquished robes are supposed to be returned?
Yes.
Well, the Chabagyas apparently refused to return robes that other monks had properly relinquished to them as part of the process.
Seriously, they just kept them.
Seems like it. And the Buddha had to step in again and declare that action refusing to return a properly relinquished robe was also an offense, a dukkaṭa.
They really tested every single loophole and boundary, didn't they?
They certainly forced the legal system to become incredibly thorough and robust.
Wow. Okay, so stepping back from all these intricate details, this whole deep dive into just one rule about robes, it really shows something quite profound, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. You see this incredibly sophisticated system evolving. It's trying so hard to balance these high ideals of discipline and non-attachment with, well, practical life.
Yeah, with human fallibility, with the need for community, for forgiveness, for clear procedures.
Exactly. It shows that laws, even ancient religious laws, aren't static. They have to respond to lived experience. They have to adapt. It's a lesson in how rules and reality interact.
It really is a fantastic illustration, and it makes you think, this isn't just ancient history about monks.
Not at all.
How often do we see this today? You know, in modern rules, regulations, company policies, even just personal goals we set for ourselves.
All the time. That constant tension between sticking to the principle, the spirit of the rule, and needing the flexibility to handle real-world situations, human error, unexpected events.
Right. How do you create systems that are both firm and fair, clear and adaptable?
It's the fundamental challenge, isn't it? And think about any group you're part of, work, family, clubs. Where do you see that friction between the letter of the law and the spirit? And how do we adjust our frameworks? How do we learn from mistakes, from loopholes, from unintended consequences to make things work better? Whether it's an ancient monastic order or a modern organization, that process of refinement is continuous.
There's a fascinating parallel across millennia. This ancient text really does give you a blueprint for thinking about how societies grapple with rules and human nature.